They thought she was just another statistic, a helpless girl they could bully, frame, and forget. They laughed when she asked to call her dad. They smirked when she cried. But they didn't check the name on the ID closely enough. They didn't know that the man they were provoking was not just a father. He was a ghost. A man who had toppled regimes and hunted the world's most dangerous terrorists. When Colonel Elijah Washington walked into that police station, the officers did not realize their careers and their lives were already over. This is not just a story about police brutality. It is a story about what happens when you wake up a sleeping giant. Emily Washington tightened her grip on the steering wheel of her beat-up 2014 Honda Civic. The dashboard was dim, the check engine light flickering like a nervous heartbeat. She was 19 years old, a sophomore pre-med student at Georgetown University on a full academic scholarship. Emily was the definition of quiet excellence. She did not party. She did not skip class. She spent her Friday nights in the library studying organic chemistry and her Sundays volunteering at the local animal shelter. She was tired. She had just finished a double shift at the Daily Grind, a coffee shop on the edge of Washington, D.C., trying to save up enough money to buy her dad a vintage watch for his birthday. She had not seen her father in some time. He worked for the government in logistics, he always said. Emily knew better than to ask questions. She knew he loved her. She knew he sent money, and she knew that when he looked at her, his eyes held a sadness that went deeper than the ocean. But mostly she knew he was rarely home. As she drove through the affluent suburb of Bethesda, taking a shortcut to her small apartment, she noticed the blue lights flash in her rearview mirror. Her stomach dropped. "Calm down, Emily," she whispered to herself. "You were not speeding. Your tags are current. Just breathe." She pulled over near a row of manicured hedges, turning off the engine and rolling down the window. She placed her hands on the wheel, 10 and 2, fingers spread. Her father had taught her that if you ever get stopped, Emily, do not move. Hands visible always. 2 doors slammed. Approaching her window was Officer Travis Mitchell. Mitchell was a man who looked like he had peaked in high school football and had been angry about it ever since. He was thick-necked, red-faced, and chewing gum with an aggression that made his jaw pop. Behind him was a younger officer, Deputy Ryan Brooks, who looked nervous, his hand hovering near his holster. "License and registration," Mitchell barked, not bothering with a greeting. The flashlight beam cut into Emily's eyes. "Good evening, officer," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "It is in my glove box. May I reach for it?" "Just get it," Mitchell snapped. Emily moved slowly. She retrieved the documents and handed them over. Mitchell snatched them, glancing at the ID, then back at her, then at the back seat of her car, which was filled with textbooks and a gym bag. "What are you doing in Bethesda?" Mitchell asked, leaning in. "You do not live around here. ID says you are from the city." "I was taking a shortcut home from work, sir. I attend Georgetown." Mitchell let out a short, mocking laugh. "Georgetown? You? What are you, on the janitorial staff?" Emily felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm a pre-med student, sir." "Right, and I am the president," Mitchell sneered. He turned to Brooks. "You smell that, Brooks?" Brooks blinked. "Smell what?" "Weed," Mitchell lied. He looked back at Emily with a predator's grin. "I smell marijuana coming from the vehicle. Step out of the car." "Officer, I do not smoke," Emily pleaded, panic setting in. "I have never smoked in my life. You can test me." "I said step out of the vehicle," Mitchell roared, yanking the door open. Before Emily could unbuckle, Mitchell reached in, grabbed her by the arm, and dragged her out. She stumbled, her sneaker catching on the asphalt. "You are resisting," Mitchell yelled for the dash cam. I'm not resisting," Emily cried out. He spun her around, slamming her chest against the side of her Honda. The metal was cold against her cheek. He kicked her legs apart, patting her down aggressively. "Please," Emily sobbed. "My dad, he is in the military. Please, just call him." "I do not care if your daddy is the Pope," Mitchell hissed in her ear. "You are in my town now." He cuffed her, the metal ratcheting tight enough to pinch the skin of her wrists. He threw her into the back of the cruiser like a sack of potatoes. As she sat there, tears streaming down her face, she watched through the plexiglass as Mitchell rummaged through her car. He tossed her textbooks onto the wet road. He ripped the lining of her seats. And then she saw it. Mitchell reached into his own vest pocket. He pulled out a small, clear baggie filled with white powder. He looked around to ensure the dash cam angle was blocked by his body, then dropped the baggie onto the driver's seat of her Honda. "Bingo," she heard him say to Brooks. "Looks like we got a dealer, Brooks. Coke." Emily screamed against the glass. "That is not mine! You put that there!" Mitchell just turned, looked at her through the glass, and winked. The holding cell at the Bethesda precinct smelled of bleach and stale vomit. Emily had been there for a while. They had taken her phone. They had taken her shoes. They had taken her dignity. She sat on the cold concrete bench, hugging her knees. She had demanded a phone call, but the desk sergeant, a heavy-set man named Sergeant Hayes, had told her the phones were down for maintenance. It was a lie. She could hear them ringing in the bullpen. Mitchell walked by the cell every so often, seemingly just to taunt her. "Georgetown student, huh?" Mitchell laughed, sipping a soda. "Wait until the dean hears about the cocaine trafficking. Bye-bye scholarship. You will be lucky to get a job flipping burgers when I'm done with you." "Why are you doing this?" Emily asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "I did not do anything to you." Mitchell stopped. His face went flat and cold. "You people come into our neighborhoods driving your junk cars thinking you own the place. I'm just taking out the trash." He walked away. Emily closed her eyes and prayed. She prayed for a miracle. She prayed for her dad. Dad. He was supposed to be overseas somewhere. She did not know. He had missed her high school graduation because of a deployment. He had missed her 19th birthday. She loved him, but she had stopped relying on him to save her a long time ago. She realized she was alone. At the front desk, Deputy Brooks was looking at the paperwork Mitchell had filed. "Hey, Travis," Brooks said quietly. "Look at this name again. Washington. Elijah Washington." "So?" Mitchell grunted, typing up the arrest report. "I ran the father's name through the system to notify next of kin," Brooks said, his brow furrowed. "It did not come back with an address, it just came back with a flag. Level 5, restricted." Mitchell waved a hand dismissively. "Probably some janitor at the Pentagon, or he is in prison. Does not matter. The girl is processed. We transfer her to county in the morning." Brooks was not so sure. He looked at the computer screen. The flag was not just red, it was black. Classified. Meanwhile, in a sprawling, nondescript hangar at Joint Base Andrews, a C-130 Hercules touched down on the runway. The engines wound down and the rear ramp lowered. A lone figure walked down the ramp. He was 6'4", built like a tank that had learned to move like a panther. He wore civilian clothes, dark jeans, a black t-shirt, a battered leather jacket. But he carried himself with an energy that made the air around him feel heavier. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow and eyes that scanned the perimeter instinctively. Colonel Elijah Washington was home. He was not logistics. Elijah was the commander of Task Force Black, a unit so elite that even most Navy SEALs did not know it existed. He answered only to the Secretary of Defense and the President. He had spent the last several months dismantling a human trafficking ring in Eastern Europe. He was exhausted, he was sore, and all he wanted to do was see his daughter. He pulled his phone out of a Faraday bag and turned it on. A flood of notifications pinged, emails, updates, debriefs. He ignored them all. He dialed Emily. Ring, ring, ring. "Hi, this is Emily. I'm studying. Leave a message." He smiled at her voice. He dialed again. Ring, ring, ring. Strange. Emily always answered. She knew his number was unlisted and only called for emergencies or when he was back. Elijah walked to the black SUV waiting for him on the tarmac. A young driver opened the door. "Welcome back, Colonel. Where to?" "My daughter's apartment in D.C., Elijah said. Sometime later, Elijah was standing in Emily's apartment. It was empty, her textbooks were gone, her bed had not been slept in, but her cat was there, meowing loudly, hungry. Emily never left the cat without food. Elijah felt a cold prickle on the back of his neck. It was the same feeling he got before an ambush. He walked to her laptop, which was sitting on her desk. He cracked the password in seconds. He pulled up the Find My iPhone app linked to their family account. The dot was not at the library. It was not at the coffee shop. The dot was stationary. Bethesda Police Department. Elijah stared at the screen. His pulse did not speed up. It slowed down. His eyes narrowed. He did not call the police station. He did not call a lawyer. He reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a fresh change of clothes, a crisp suit he kept for debriefings. He holstered his sidearm, a customized Sig Sauer, under his jacket. He put on his sunglasses even though it was night. "Driver," Elijah said into his comms earpiece, "change of plans. Bethesda, step on it." The lobby of the Bethesda Police Department was quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. Sergeant Hayes was dozing behind the high glass partition, a half-eaten donut on a napkin nearby. The double doors slid open. Colonel Elijah Washington walked in. He did not stomp. He did not yell. He glided across the linoleum floor with a silence that was terrifying. He approached the glass. Sergeant Hayes blinked awake, looking up. He saw a tall black man in a sharp suit. He assumed it was a lawyer or a distraught parent. He leaned back, putting on his bureaucrat face. "Can I help you?" Hayes asked, bored. "You have my daughter," Elijah said. His voice was low, a baritone rumble that vibrated against the glass. "Emily Washington." Hayes typed slowly on his keyboard. Washington, yeah. Brought in about some time ago. Possession with intent to distribute. Resisting arrest, assault on an officer." Elijah's face did not move. "Emily does not drink, she does not smoke, and she certainly does not deal." Hayes shrugged. "Tell it to the judge. Arraignment is in the morning. Visiting hours are over. Come back then." "I'm not coming back then," Elijah said. "I'm taking her home now." Hayes laughed. He actually laughed. "Look, pal, I do not know who you think you are, but you do not give orders here. She is processed. She is in the system now. Get lost before I put you in a cell next to her." Elijah looked at the nameplate on Hayes's chest. Then he looked at the security camera in the corner. "I'm giving you one chance, Sergeant Hayes," Elijah said. "Pick up that phone, call the arresting officer, tell him to bring her out." "Or what?" Hayes sneered, standing up and reaching for his radio. "You are going to assault an officer?" Elijah did not answer. He simply reached into his jacket pocket. Hayes flinched, hand going to his gun, but Elijah did not pull a weapon. He pulled out a small black leather wallet. He flipped it open and pressed it against the glass. It was not a badge. It was an ID card. But it was not police, and it was not FBI. It was white with a gold-embossed eagle and a diagonal red stripe. Below the photo, it simply read, "Department of Defense, Clearance Yankee White, Authority Unrestricted." Hayes squinted. He had never seen a card like that. "What is that? A library card?" Elijah put the wallet away. "That was your chance." He turned and walked toward the heavy steel door that led to the bullpen in the cells. It was locked via a magnetic keypad. "Hey," Hayes yelled, "you cannot go back there." Elijah ignored him. He didn't try to hack the keypad. He didn't try to kick the door. He stepped back, raised his right leg, and drove his heel into the magnetic lock mechanism with the force of a battering ram. Crack! The electronic lock shattered. The door swung open. Hayes scrambled for his radio. Code 10 in the lobby, intruder breaching the back. Elijah walked into the bullpen. There were 6 officers at their desks. They all looked up, stunned as this stranger in a suit walked in over the ruins of their security door. Officer Mitchell was standing by the water cooler, laughing with Brooks. He turned and saw Elijah. "Who the hell are you?" Mitchell demanded, hand dropping to his gun. Elijah scanned the room. He identified the threats in a split second. 6 targets, unprepared, sloppy. "I am the father," Elijah said. "Freeze!" Mitchell yelled, drawing his weapon. "Get on the ground now!" The other officers drew their guns, forming a semicircle. Elijah did not raise his hands. He looked Mitchell dead in the eye. "You planted cocaine on a 19-year-old medical student. You bruised her wrists. And I'm betting you smashed her phone so she could not record you." "I said get on the ground or I will shoot you," Mitchell screamed, his finger tightening on the trigger. "If you pull that trigger," Elijah said calmly, "your family will never find your body." The air in the room froze. This was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. "Last warning," Mitchell yelled. Suddenly, the phone on the nearest desk rang. Then the next one, then all of them. Every phone in the bullpen started ringing simultaneously. Then the lights flickered and went out. The emergency red lights bathed the room in a bloody glow. A voice boomed over the station's intercom system, but it was not Sergeant Hayes. It was a crisp, digital voice. "Weapons down. This facility is now under the jurisdiction of the United States military. Surrender immediately." Mitchell looked around wildly. "What is this? Is this a prank?" The front windows of the police station shattered inward as canister after canister of tear gas flew into the lobby. "Gas!" someone yelled, but Elijah did not cough. He stood still amidst the chaos. He looked at Mitchell. "You bullied the wrong girl," Elijah whispered. The tear gas canisters hissed, spinning across the linoleum floor, spewing thick white clouds that burned the eyes and throat. The officers in the bullpen were in chaos. They were local cops, used to traffic stops and breaking up domestic disputes, not combat. They coughed, gagged, and scrambled for cover, their vision blurred. Officer Mitchell's eyes streamed as he swung his service weapon wildly toward where Elijah had been standing. "I cannot see! Where is he?" Mitchell screamed, panic rising in his voice like bile. He did not get an answer. Instead, he felt a hand, large, calloused, and unyielding, clamp onto his wrist. With a sickening crunch, Mitchell's wrist was twisted upward. The gun clattered to the floor. Before Mitchell could scream, a boot swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him. Elijah Washington stood over him. The gas did not seem to affect him. He was not even blinking. He looked like a demon rising from the mist. "Stay down," Elijah commanded. It was not a suggestion. Suddenly, the back exit exploded inward. Glass and wood debris showered the room. Through the smoke, 4 figures emerged. They were clad in full tactical gear, black combat fatigues, panoramic night vision goggles flipped up, suppressed rifles tight against their shoulders. No police patches, no badges, just the distinct, terrifying professionalism of Tier 1 operators. This was Alpha Team, Elijah's personal detail. "Clear left, clear right, target subdued." The operators moved with fluid precision. In moments, every police officer in the room was on the ground, zip-tied and disarmed. They didn't shout. They didn't swear. They just worked. One of the operators, a mountain of a man named Garrett, approached Elijah. "Colonel, perimeter is secure. We have jammed all outgoing communications from this building. The local 911 dispatch has been rerouted to our command center." "You own the building, boss." Elijah nodded, adjusting his suit jacket. "Keep them here. Nobody leaves. Nobody enters. If the chief of police shows up, let him in, then lock the door behind him." Elijah turned his back on the groaning officers and walked toward the holding cells. He reached the cell at the end of the hall. Through the bars, he saw Emily. She was curled in a ball in the corner, covering her ears, trembling. The noise of the breach had terrified her. "Emily," Elijah said softly. She looked up. Her eyes were red and swollen, her mascara running down her cheeks. She saw the man in the suit. For a second, she did not recognize him. He looked so dangerous, so different from the dad who grilled burgers on the 4th of July. "Dad," she whispered. Elijah did not wait for the keys. He pulled a compact breaching tool from his belt, a small charge of directional explosive. "Cover your ears, baby girl. Turn away." Emily scrambled back. Thump, the lock mechanism disintegrated. The door swung open. Elijah rushed in and fell to his knees, scooping her up. Emily collapsed into his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. The smell of his cologne, sandalwood, and gun oil was the only thing anchoring her to reality. "I am here," he whispered into her hair, rocking her back and forth. "I am here. I've got you. Nobody is ever going to touch you again." "They planted it," she choked out, gripping his lapels. "They said I was a dealer. I was just coming home." "I know," Elijah said, his voice hardening into something jagged. He stood up, lifting her easily as if she was still a little girl. He walked her out of the cell. As they entered the bullpen, Emily saw the scene. The police officers who had mocked her were now lined up on their knees, hands bound behind their backs, guarded by men who looked like they ate tanks for breakfast. Mitchell was on his knees in the center. His nose was bleeding. He looked up, saw Emily, and for the first time, true fear dawned in his eyes. "You," Mitchell stammered. "You cannot do this. This is kidnapping. This is terrorism." Elijah handed Emily to Garrett. "Get her to the medic in the SUV. Check her for concussion and bruising. Get her some water." "Yes, sir," Garrett said gently, guiding Emily away. "Come on, miss. You're safe now." Once Emily was out of the room, the temperature seemed to drop. Elijah turned back to Mitchell. He pulled a chair over, turned it backward, and sat down directly in front of the kneeling officer. Elijah leaned in close. "Officer Mitchell, my name is Colonel Washington. I specialize in counterinsurgency and dismantling hostile regimes. Do you know what the definition of a hostile regime is?" Mitchell stayed silent, sweating. "It is a group of armed men who use fear to control a population," Elijah said. "Sound familiar?" "I'm a police officer," Mitchell spat, trying to regain some bravado. "I protect this community." "No," Elijah said calmly. "You are a gang member with a badge, and I am about to dismantle your operation." The front doors slid open. A short, stout man in a trench coat burst in, his face purple with rage. It was Chief of Police Donovan. He had been called by Sergeant Hayes right before the comms were cut. "What the hell is going on here?" Chief Donovan roared. "Who are you people? Release my men immediately!" Elijah did not stand up. He just looked at Garrett, who had returned. "Lock the door." Click. Chief Donovan stopped. He looked at the operators. He looked at Elijah. He looked at his own men bound and gagged on the floor. "You are making a grave mistake," Donovan said, his voice trembling. "I have the mayor on the line. I have the governor on speed dial." Elijah stood up slowly and walked toward the chief. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, a printout from the printer that had been running in the background. "Chief Donovan," Elijah said, "according to my intelligence, your precinct has a much higher arrest rate for resisting arrest than any other precinct in the state. Strangely, most of those arrests involve minorities passing through the town. And even more strangely, the body cam footage for those arrests is corrupted most of the time." Donovan went pale. "Technical glitches. We are underfunded." "And yet," Elijah continued, "Officer Mitchell here drives a brand new truck on a salary that does not add up. That is interesting math." Elijah signaled to a young operator sitting at Mitchell's computer. This was Tyler, the team's cyber warfare specialist. "Tyler, talk to me," Elijah said. Tyler typed furiously, "Sir, I have bypassed their local server firewalls. They are using a cheap deletion protocol. They think hitting delete on the dashcam footage actually erases it. It is cute. Can you restore the file from earlier today?" Elijah asked. "Already done," Tyler smirked, casting it to the main monitor. Now the large flat-screen TV on the bullpen wall, usually used for morning briefings, flickered to life. The room went silent. On the screen, the grainy dashcam footage played. It showed Mitchell pulling Emily over. It showed her compliance. It showed Mitchell dragging her out. And then, clear as day, it showed Mitchell reaching into his own vest, pulling out the baggie and dropping it onto her seat. "There," Elijah said, pointing at the screen. "Kidnapping, assault, planting evidence, conspiracy to distribute narcotics." Elijah turned to the chief. "And since you signed off on his previous reports, Chief, that makes you an accessory or a co-conspirator. We will let the JAG lawyers decide." Mitchell started hyperventilating. "It was a joke, just a scare tactic. I was not going to charge her, I swear." Elijah walked back to Mitchell and leaned down. "You were going to ruin her life because you were bored, because you felt small. Well, officer, you're about to find out just how small you really are." As dawn broke over Bethesda, the police station remained a fortress. Black SUVs surrounded the perimeter. The local news vans had arrived, but they were being held back by military police who had set up a cordon blocks away. Inside, the dynamic had shifted from a siege to a tribunal. Elijah sat in the chief's office, feet up on the mahogany desk. Chief Donovan was sitting on a folding chair in the corner, handcuffed. Mitchell was in an interrogation room down the hall, isolated. The door opened and a man in a sharp gray suit entered. He was not military. He was Special Agent Reynolds from the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. "Colonel Washington," the agent said, extending a hand, "you have made quite a mess." "I cleaned up a mess," Elijah corrected, shaking the hand. "I just did it loudly." "Washington, you cannot just occupy a domestic police station. The Posse Comitatus Act does not apply when a foreign terror asset is involved," Elijah interrupted. The agent paused. "Foreign terror asset? What are you talking about? This is a corrupt traffic cop." Elijah tossed a file onto the desk. "Check Mitchell's financials." Tyler dug deep. That cocaine Mitchell planted. It was not from the evidence locker. It was high-purity product. And do you know where the money in Mitchell's offshore account is coming from? A shell company linked to the Albanian mob. The agent's eyes widened as he flipped through the file. "He's not just a bully," Elijah said, his voice cold. "He is a distributor. He pulls over college kids, plants the drugs, then offers to make the charges go away for a cash fee. If they do not pay, he ruins them. If they do pay, he owns them. He has been running a protection racket under the color of law." The agent looked up, stunned. "This changes everything. This is RICO. This is federal." "It is yours," Elijah said. "I do not care about the glory. I want the conviction. But first, I want him to know who he messed with." Elijah walked into the interrogation room. Mitchell was slumped over the metal table. He looked broken. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who knows his life is over. Elijah placed a photo on the table. It was a picture of Emily graduating high school, smiling. That girl, Elijah said quietly. She wants to be a pediatrician. She wants to help kids. She works double shifts to buy me birthday presents. Mitchell did not look up. I did not know. Ignorance is not a defense, Elijah said. You saw a target. You saw skin color and a cheap car, and you assumed she was weak. You assumed she had no one. Elijah leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. I have killed men for less than what you did to her. But I am not going to kill you, Travis. That would be too easy. I'm going to make you a symbol. Please, Mitchell wept. I have a family. My wife. Does your wife know you sell cocaine? Elijah asked. Does she know you beat up teenage girls? Mitchell froze. By the time the news spreads, your face will be on every news channel in America. The dash cam footage is already on YouTube. It has millions of views. You are not just a criminal anymore, Travis. You are the face of everything wrong with this system. You will never walk down a street without people knowing what you are. You will go to federal prison, and in federal prison, ex-cops who hurt kids do not have a very good time. Mitchell put his head in his hands and sobbed. It was the ugly, desperate sound of a bully who had finally met a bigger predator. Suddenly, the door to the interrogation room opened. It was Tyler. Colonel, you need to see this. We found something else on Mitchell's phone. Elijah stepped out. Tyler handed him a tablet. We recovered his deleted texts. Look at the thread with Deputy Brooks. Elijah read the texts. Mitchell, grab the girl. We need a new runner. The last one quit. If she resists, rough her up. Make her scared. She will do whatever we say to avoid jail. Elijah stared at the screen. It was not just a racket. They were trying to recruit Emily as a mule. They were going to force her to transport drugs for them by holding the fake felony charge over her head. A dark fury, colder and deeper than before, settled in Elijah's chest. Where is Deputy Brooks? Elijah asked. He is in a holding cell too, Tyler said. But Colonel, he is talking. He wants to cut a deal. Elijah stormed down the hallway. He found Brooks sitting on the bench, shaking. Brooks was young, barely older than Emily. He looked up as Elijah entered. I didn't want to do it, Brooks blurted out. Mitchell made me. He said if I didn't help him, he would plant drugs on me too. He runs the whole shift. Elijah looked at the kid. He saw fear, yes, but he also saw weakness, complicity. You watched him slam my daughter against a car, Elijah said. You watched him frame her and you said nothing. I was scared, Brooks cried. My daughter was scared, Elijah said. She was 19. You had a gun and a badge. You were sworn to protect her. Your fear is not an excuse. It is an indictment. Elijah turned to the FBI agent who had followed him. Agent Reynolds, this one talks. Give him immunity if he gives you the entire network. Every cop, every judge, every mob connection involved in this ring. I want the earth scorched. Agent Reynolds nodded grimly. Consider it done. Elijah walked out of the holding area. He needed air. He walked out the front door of the station, past the bewildered media, past the military perimeter. He found Emily sitting in the back of one of the black SUVs, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She was drinking hot tea. She looked up at him. She saw the exhaustion in his face. Is it over? She asked. Elijah sat next to her, pulling the door shut to block out the noise of the cameras. The bad part is over, he said. Now comes the justice. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. I knew you would come. Even when I was in the cell, I knew. Elijah kissed the top of her head, fighting back tears for the first time in years. I will always come, Emily, always. But the story was not over. Mitchell was going down, but the system that allowed him to exist was about to fight back. The governor was on TV calling Elijah a vigilante. The legal battle was just beginning, and Elijah Washington had one more card to play. A card that would expose the corruption all the way to the state capitol. The story broke and shattered the national consciousness. The dash cam footage of Officer Mitchell planting drugs on Emily Washington was playing on a loop on CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. It had millions of views on social media within hours. The image of Colonel Elijah Washington standing amidst the tear gas, a father protecting his child, became an instant icon of resistance. But the system does not go down without a fight. Governor Harlan, a man with slicked-back gray hair and a history of suppressing police misconduct investigations, held a press conference at the state capitol. He looked angry. What we saw in Bethesda was not justice, Harlan thundered into the microphones. It was a military coup. Colonel Washington violated the Posse Comitatus Act. He held local law enforcement officers hostage. I'm calling on the Pentagon to strip him of his rank and arrest him immediately. We cannot have rogue soldiers acting as judge, jury, and executioner. The narrative was shifting. The media began to ask if Elijah had gone too far. Was he a hero or a vigilante? Elijah sat in a safe house provided by the agency, watching the news. Emily was asleep in the next room, exhausted. "They're coming for you, boss," Garrett said, pacing the room. JAG is already drafting the charges. They want to court-martial you to save the governor's reputation. Elijah stared at the screen. "Let them come. I did what I had to do." "You need a lawyer, Elijah," a voice said from the doorway. Elijah turned. Standing there was not a soldier. It was a civilian wearing a suit that cost more than Mitchell's annual salary. It was Eric Lawson, the real-life civil rights attorney known for representing the families of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. He walked into the room. He did not look intimidated by the Tier 1 operator standing guard. "Mr. Lawson," Elijah said, standing up, "I did not call you." "No," Lawson said, shaking his hand firmly, "but your file crossed my desk, and when I saw the video of that officer planting cocaine on a scholarship student, I booked the first flight. You fight the war on the ground, Colonel. I will fight the war in the court of public opinion." Lawson sat down and opened his briefcase. "The governor is trying to make this about your actions," Lawson said. "We are going to make it about theirs." Sometime later, the hearing was held not in a military tribunal, but in a federal courtroom due to the confusing jurisdictional nature of the incident. The world was watching. The prosecutor, a crony of Governor Harlan, stood up. "Your Honor, Colonel Washington assaulted officers. He destroyed public property. He is a danger to society." Eric Lawson stood up. He walked slowly to the center of the room. He didn't shout. He adjusted his glasses. "Your Honor," Lawson began, "the prosecution wants to talk about broken locks and bruised wrists. I want to talk about the blue ledger." A murmur went through the courtroom. Lawson signaled to the bailiff, who handed a thick stack of documents to the judge. "Thanks to Colonel Washington's team," Lawson continued, "we have recovered the deleted files from the Bethesda server. These files do not just show Officer Mitchell planting drugs on Emily Washington. They show a systematic pattern of extortion going back years." Lawson projected a spreadsheet onto the courtroom wall. "This is a list of hundreds of names," Lawson said, pointing to the screen. "Every single one of them was an out-of-town driver. Every single one was charged with resisting or possession, and every single one was offered a plea deal. Pay a civil forfeiture fee to the police department, and the charges would be dropped." The courtroom gasped. "This was not a police station," Lawson said, his voice rising with righteous fury. "It was a toll booth operated by the mafia, sanctioned by Chief Donovan and ignored by Governor Harlan." Lawson turned to the cameras in the back of the room. "Governor Harlan says Colonel Washington is a rogue soldier. I say he is the only man in that building who is upholding the Constitution. He did not break the law. He stopped a crime in progress." The prosecution objected, but it was too weak. The damage was done. Then came the final blow. Lawson called his witness, Deputy Ryan Brooks. Brooks walked to the stand looking terrified. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit, having been denied bail. "State your name," Lawson said. "Ryan Brooks." "Officer Brooks," Lawson asked, "did Officer Mitchell tell you why he targeted Emily Washington?" Brooks trembled. "Yes. He said he needed a clean face to run packages to the north side. He said if we hooked her on a felony, we could force her to drive for us." "And did Chief Donovan know?" "Yes," Brooks whispered. "The chief took a cut of the profits. He used it to fund the governor's re-election campaign." Pandemonium, the courtroom erupted. The judge hammered his gavel, but the sound was drowned out by the roar of the gallery. Governor Harlan, watching from his office, turned off the TV. His face drained of color. The house of cards had collapsed. The federal courthouse in D.C. was surrounded by a sea of people. It had been some time since the incident at Bethesda, and the world had not moved on. The Blue Ledger scandal had sparked a nationwide movement. Signs reading, "Justice for Emily" and "Break the Blue Wall" bobbed above the heads of thousands of protesters. Inside courtroom 4B, the air was so thick with tension it felt difficult to breathe. This was not just a sentencing hearing, it was a reckoning. Travis Mitchell sat at the defense table. He looked nothing like the swaggering predator who had terrorized the streets. He had lost weight. His skin was pasty, the result of months in solitary confinement awaiting trial. His suit hung loosely on his frame, a pathetic costume for a man whose life was already over. In the front row sat Colonel Elijah Washington. He wore a charcoal suit, his posture impeccable, his face a mask of stone. Beside him sat Emily. She looked different too. The fear that had defined her eyes before was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. She held a notepad, her victim impact statement. Judge Mitchell, a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for harsh sentences on public corruption cases, entered the room. All rise. The room shuffled and sat. The room, Judge Mitchell peered over his glasses at Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, the judge began, his voice echoing in the silent room. In my years on the bench, I have seen murderers, thieves, and terrorists, but rarely have I seen a case of such arrogant betrayal as yours. You took an oath to protect. Instead, you used your badge as a hunting license. Mitchell's lawyer tried to intervene. Your Honor, my client has expressed remorse. Your client, the judge interrupted, expressed remorse only when he was caught. The forensic evidence shows he laughed while planting narcotics on an innocent student. The judge turned to Emily. Ms. Washington, the court will hear you now. Emily stood up. She walked to the podium. Her hands shook slightly, but she took a deep breath, looked at her father, and steadied herself. She did not look at the judge. She turned and looked directly at Mitchell. You wanted to make me a statistic, Emily said, her voice clear and cutting. You looked at me and decided I was nothing. You thought that because I was young and black and driving an old car that my life did not matter. You thought I was disposable. Mitchell stared at the table, refusing to meet her eyes. But you were wrong, Emily continued. Not because my father is a colonel, not because he came for me. You were wrong because no one is disposable. You took away my sense of safety. For a long time, I could not sleep without the lights on. I could not drive my car without shaking. But today, I am taking that back. You are not a monster, Travis. Monsters are scary. You are just a small, sad man who needed to hurt people to feel tall. She closed her notebook. I do not hate you. I pity you. She sat down. Elijah placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent pulse of pride. The judge nodded. He shuffled his papers and looked down at Mitchell. Travis Mitchell, on the counts of deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, and kidnapping, I sentence you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The gavel came down. It sounded like a gunshot. Mitchell let out a strangled sob. His knees gave way and the U.S. Marshals had to hook him under the arms to keep him upright. As they dragged him out, he looked back, searching for someone. His wife, his friends, anyone. But the benches behind him were empty. His wife had filed for divorce the week the dashcam footage leaked. His brothers in blue had abandoned him to save their own skins. He was completely, utterly alone. The United States Penitentiary at Coleman was a high-security facility. It was a place of concrete, steel, and noise, a constant low-level roar of shouting, clanging doors, and aggression. Mitchell was processed in silence. He was stripped, searched, and given a beige jumpsuit with a number stenciled on the back. He was no longer Officer Mitchell. He was inmate number whatever. Because he was a former police officer, Mitchell was placed in protective custody. But in prison, protective custody is not safety. It is purgatory. He was locked in a small cell for most of the day. His first night was the hardest. The lights in the cell block never truly turned off. They just dimmed to a sickly yellow buzz. Mitchell lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. From the vents, he could hear voices. The kite system, inmates talking through the ventilation shafts. Hey, new fish, a voice rasped from the vent. We know you're in there, Mitchell. Mitchell froze. We saw you on the news, the voice continued, dripping with malice. The tough guy who likes to frame little girls. You know, my cousin is doing time because of a cop like you. Leave me alone, Mitchell whispered to the empty room. You cannot hide in protective custody forever, the voice laughed. Sooner or later, you got to go to the yard. Sooner or later, a door gets left open. We got time, Mitchell. We got nothing but time. Mitchell curled into a ball, pulling the scratchy wool blanket over his head. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to summon the memory of his authority, his power. But it was gone. He was the prey now. The fear he had inflicted on hundreds of people had finally come home to roost. The karma did not stop with Mitchell. The blue ledger that Elijah's team had uncovered was a poison pill for everyone involved. Chief Donovan was arrested sometime later. He was pulled out of his office in handcuffs by the FBI. He tried to cut a deal, offering up the governor, but the feds already had everything they needed. Donovan was charged with racketeering and corruption. The man who had built a career on ignoring the law was now facing years behind bars. Governor Harlan did not go to jail, but he suffered a fate he considered worse: irrelevance. The scandal made him political poison. His own party forced him to resign to avoid impeachment. He retreated to his estate, disgraced, stripped of his power, and embroiled in endless civil lawsuits from the victims of the Bethesda Police Department. He would spend the rest of his life writing checks to the people he had oppressed. The system had been shaken. Across the country, the Emily Washington case became a precedent. Police departments were audited. Dashcam policies were rewritten. The Department of Justice launched a task force specifically to investigate small-town corruption. Eric Lawson, the attorney who had stood by them, called Elijah sometime later. "We did it, Colonel," Lawson said. "This case is going to save lives. Officers are thinking twice now. They know someone might be watching." For Emily, the victory was bittersweet. The nightmares did not disappear overnight. Trauma leaves a scar even when you win. She took some time off from Georgetown to heal. She spent time with her father at his cabin in Virginia. For the first time in her life, she really got to know him, not as the distant soldier, but as a man. They spent mornings hiking and evenings sitting by the fire. Elijah taught her how to box. "Not to hurt people," he told her as he wrapped her hands, "but so you never feel helpless again. Physical strength builds mental armor." One evening, staring into the fire, Emily broke the silence. "I'm not going back to pre-med, Dad." Elijah looked up from his book. "You have wanted to be a doctor since you were little." "I know," Emily said. "I wanted to fix bodies, but after everything I realized the system is sicker than any patient. I want to fix that." She looked at him, her eyes burning with a new purpose. "I applied to transfer to the pre-law program. I want to be a civil rights attorney. I want to be the person who shows up when the colonel cannot." Elijah smiled, a genuine crinkling smile that reached his eyes. "The world has enough doctors, Emily, but it definitely needs more warriors. I'm proud of you." Elijah Washington made changes too. He formally resigned from the task force. The retirement ceremony was small, classified, and attended by some of the most dangerous men on the planet. He turned down the lucrative offers from private military contractors. He did not want to be a mercenary. Instead, he opened a small consulting firm in D.C., Washington, and Associates Risk Management. On the surface, it looked like corporate security. In reality, it was a pro bono investigation unit. Elijah and his team, Garrett, Tyler, and the others, began taking cases that the police ignored. Missing children in underprivileged neighborhoods, domestic abuse victims whose stalkers were politically connected. He was not fighting wars for oil or geopolitics anymore. He was fighting for his neighbors. He was still a ghost, but now he was a guardian. Sometime later, on a crisp autumn evening much like the one that had started it all, Emily was driving back to D.C. after visiting her dad. She was behind the wheel of a Volvo XC90, a tank of a car that Elijah had insisted on. She was driving through a suburb just outside the city. Not Bethesda, she never went back there, but a similar town. Blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror. Emily's breath hitched. Her hands tightened on the leather steering wheel. The flashback hit her hard, the cold metal against her cheek, Mitchell's sneering face. "Breathe," she told herself. "You are not a victim." She pulled over calmly. She lowered the window. She placed her hands on the wheel, fingers spread. An officer walked up. He was young, clean-shaven. He shone his flashlight into the car, but kept the beam out of her eyes. "Good evening, ma'am," he said politely. Emily turned to look at him. Her heart was pounding, but her face was calm. "Good evening, officer. I pulled you over because your registration sticker looks a little peeled back. Just wanted to make sure it does not fall off." Emily blinked. "Oh, thank you. I will check it." The officer smiled. "You have a safe night. Drive careful now." He turned and walked away. Emily sat there for a moment, the engine idling. She watched him get back into his cruiser and turn off the lights. He did not ask for ID. He did not accuse her. He just did his job. She let out a long, shaky breath. She looked at the passenger seat. Sitting there was a file folder, her acceptance letter to Harvard Law School. She reached over and touched the paper. She thought of Mitchell rotting in a cell. She thought of her father, probably awake right now, watching over the city. And she thought of herself. She was not the scared girl in the Honda anymore. She was Emily Washington, future attorney, daughter of the ghost, and she was unbreakable. She put the car in drive and pulled back onto the road. The darkness stretched out ahead of her, but for the first time in a long time, she was not afraid of what it held. She was ready to light it up. And that is how you end a nightmare. Mitchell thought he was the law, but he found out the hard way that there is always a bigger fish. Emily did not just survive, she evolved. She turned her trauma into a weapon to help others. This story is a reminder of how unchecked tyranny is dangerous, but courage unleashed is unstoppable. If this finale gave you chills, if you loved seeing justice served ice cold, then hit that like button right now. It tells the algorithm that we want more stories where the good guys win and the corrupt get what they deserve. Comment below, what was your favorite part? Was it the judge's speech, or was it Mitchell realizing he was all alone? I read every comment. And finally, if you have not already, subscribe and turn on notifications. We are building a community here. And I have another story coming next week about a corrupt HOA president who messes with the wrong retired engineer. You do not want to miss it. Stay safe, stay strong, and keep fighting the good fight. I am out. In the end, this story leaves us with one powerful, unforgettable lesson. No matter how dark the night gets, no matter how powerless you feel when the system turns against you, never underestimate the unbreakable bond between a parent's love and a child's quiet strength. Emily thought she was completely alone in that cold cell, facing cruelty and lies from people who were supposed to protect her. But deep down, she carried something far more powerful than fear. The knowledge that her father would move heaven and earth for her. And he did. What looked like an ordinary young woman driving an old car became the spark that exposed corruption and brought down an entire ring of bullies hiding behind badges. The real message is this: your worth is never defined by someone else's prejudice or power. You are never truly alone if someone loves you fiercely. And even when the world tries to break you, that love, combined with courage, can turn pain into purpose. Emily didn't just survive, she rose up and decided to become the voice for others who have no one. Her father showed us that real strength isn't loud or flashy. It's the quiet decision to stand up when it matters most. So if you're going through something tough right now, remember this: the sleeping giants in your life, whether it's family, faith, or your own inner fire, can wake up and change everything. Hold on, keep going. Your story isn't over. What part of this story touched you the most? Emily's courage in the courtroom, her father's fierce protection, or the way she turned her pain into a calling to help others? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel with notifications on. We're building a community that believes good can still win, and I've got even more powerful, heart-pounding stories coming your way. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and never stop fighting for what's right. I'll see you in the next one.